Okay, in this next section, notice there's one new change here. It says write the slope-intercept form of the equation of the line through the given point with the given slope. It does not say write the standard form. This is the first time that it does not ask us to write it in standard form. So let's just see how that's different, and we'll just do problem 16. All right, so again, I ask, do I have the slope? And the answer is yes. And then I ask, do I have the y-intercept? And the answer is no. So if the answer to that question of y-intercept is no, then I have to use the y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. This part is no different from the last ones we did. Y minus 4 equals 3/8 x plus 5. What is different, though, is what does it mean to leave it in slope-intercept form? We've gotten really good about putting it in standard form, but not so much with the slope-intercept form. So with the slope-intercept form, I'm going to discourage you from clearing out the fractions, because clearing out the fractions means we're going to get a coefficient in front of the y. And again, we want it to be y equals mx plus b. We want no coefficient in front of the y. It's just going to be a 1. So do not multiply through by the 8. Don't multiply through by an 8 to clear out the 3/8 fraction. Just leave that and distribute it. So some of these rules will apply now. So I would say distribute that. So we're going to have y minus 4 equals 3/8 x plus 15/8. Right, 3/8 times 5, 15/8. So we've gotten it more like this. We've got an mx plus some number. It's not going to be the y-intercept, though, because we don't have this side in the correct form. We still have this 4 with it. In order to, if we add this 4 over here, we're going to have to add 4 and 15/8 together. So before we do that, let's change this into a fraction of eighths. So this would be 32/8 equals 3/8 x plus 15/8. Now let's add the 32/8 to both sides. Then we can just combine those two easily. So when I add 32/8 to this side, I end up with y equals 3/8 x. 32/8 and 15/8 would give me 47/8. That is slope-intercept form, right? Here's the slope, and here is the y-intercept. So it's just shy of 6. It's 5 and 5/8 is the y-intercept, and then the slope is 3/8. Okay, so I'm not going to do any more. Again, that you might need to go back and watch that part again if you don't feel super confident. But the big difference is don't clear out the fractions. Because you will cause a coefficient in front of the x, and we do not want that to happen. Okay, now let's go to the next section, which is write the standard form of the equation of the line through the given points. Notice it doesn't say through the points with the slope. It just says the given points. So that's the first thing we have to do. Do we know the slope? No, we don't. We are just given 2 points. So let's find the slope. I just said I wasn't going to write this again, and I did. Okay, y2, actually I'm going to use this as my y2, and this is my y1. So then it's 6 minus a negative 10. So we end up with 5 in the numerator and 16 in the denominator. So then I say, do I know the y-intercept? When I have 2 points to check here and both fail, that is not a 0, and that is not a 0. So I have to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I'm going to fill in y minus. Now you might say, well, which one do I use? It does not matter. The equation that you get that's in point slope form will look different depending on whether you use this one or this one. But once we change it into standard form, it won't matter which one you use. They'll both be the same. If you don't believe me, how about I do it with 6/7 and then you try it with negative 10 too, and see that you get the same thing. All right, so I'm going to use this one right here. So y minus 7 equals m, which we just found out was 5/16 times x minus 6. Now we are trying to change it in standard form, so we want no fractions at all. So I'm going to multiply through by 16. This will give me 16y minus 16 times 7, that's 42, 112 equals 16 times 5/16 is 5. Again, remember, I'm not multiplying it by 16 by x minus 6 because I already used up the 16 when I multiplied it by that part of the term. Now I'm going to distribute that 5 through, sorry, this is getting squished. 16y minus 112 equals 5x minus 30. Now up here, I'm going to take and bring the 5x over to the other side. So I've got 5x plus 16y equals, and then I'm going to add the 112 to this negative 30. And so 102, I think it's 182. Yeah. And all right, I was almost going to box that in. That is not the standard form because we have the negative coefficient in front of the x. So it's going to be 5x minus 16y equals negative 182. And that would be standard form. Okay, let me see. Yeah, I only give you 3 more of these to do. So I'm not going to go ahead and do any more of these. I'm going to let you do these. I just want to caution you about this one point. This is a total tempting point to say, oh yeah, that is the y-intercept. It is not. Remember, it's the x term that has to be the 0 in order for it to be the y-intercept. This is actually the x-intercept. It would be 5, 0 would be right over here, right? So our line, whichever direction it goes, would cross right through that point. Now we want this one, which is a 0 on the x coordinate and some number on the y coordinate, right? So don't be tempted by that. Okay, I just want to pause for a second because I feel like we've been doing a lot of these problems and I don't want you to get to the point where you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is so much to remember. I've made a flow chart for you, which hopefully you've printed out. And it just has 2 sections to it. I tried to get them both a decent size, but I could not do it. So the first one, and I'm going to have to come down here and look at this little guy. First one is this guy right here. Okay, so am I given the slope? All right, so in this part of our kind of flow chart, the slope is given. So if you know the slope, look at this. And then there will have to be, no matter what your problem is, you're going to have to be given a point somehow. All right, so is that point the y-intercept or is that point not the y-intercept? If the point is the y-intercept, then you use y equals mx plus b to find the equation of the line. All right, if the point is not the y-intercept, then use the y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 to find the equation of the line. All right, so if you have the slope, you have 2 choices here. It's either the y-intercept is the point that's given or it's not. And then these are the 2 different things that you would do, right? What I've been doing is mixing some of these in though with your given the slope versus this other part, which is monstrously large, where you are not given the slope. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit here so you can see it. All right, so we have not gotten to these approaches yet. But if no slope is given, let's just focus on this one because that's the one that we've done so far, is where you are given 2 points. So the first thing you have to do is find the slope using the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then once you do that from here, you have to make a decision or a judgment here. You know the y-intercept or you don't know the y-intercept. And if you do know the y-intercept, again, it goes back to use y equals mx plus b. And if you don't know it, then use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Again, we'll get to these other 2 in just a second, but if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, like when do we use this, when do we not use that, this is here for you to use to just kind of go through. So remember, you've got 2 situations. Either you do not know the slope, no slope is given, and you're going to have to find it. All right, so far we've only done that by using 2 points, or the slope is given, this little guy over here. And then you don't have to worry about it. You just go straight to using one of those 2 forms, right? Now, I did not put in here how to change from slope-intercept form or point-slope form into the standard form, but I do have another sheet that has that on there. Hopefully you've also printed that out. It's just a summary of everything that we're doing with equations of lines and the different forms and such. And it looks like Actually, you should have written those down in your notes when you watched the last one of the last videos, but if not, it's on this sheet that has, you know, the different forms of the line and stuff. It's down at the bottom of the page here, and it starts on here with 4 of the points, and then the other 2 are on the back of the next page. So it's everything that we've been saying, just written down. Okay, let's move on to the next type of problem. All right, and then we get to the good stuff. All right, so write the slope-intercept form. Again, I'm changing back and forth, not because the procedure for finding the equation is different, but I want you to get practice writing things in standard form, writing things in slope-intercept form. So this next section is the exact same thing as before, except now you're writing it in slope-intercept form at the end instead of in standard form. Okay, so again, I asked, do I know the slope? Nope. So I'm going to have to use these 2 points to find the slope. All right, so m equals 2 minus 0 over 7 minus negative 1. So I get 2 over 8, which is 1/4. Do I know the y-intercept? Again, I check the x coordinates. Neither of them is 0, so no, I don't know them. So that means I'm going to have to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I fill in the information. I'm going to choose this one because if you see a 0 in the y coordinate, it does make it a little bit easier from a computational perspective to use that one. Again, it will not matter when we write it in the end, but it does make the computation a little bit easier. So y minus 0 equals m, which is 1/4, times x minus a negative 1. All right, again, it asks me to write it in slope-intercept form, which means do not get rid of the fraction because that will introduce a coefficient in front of the y. All right, let me just go through here and I'm going to kind of clean things up. So I don't need to write that minus 0. I can just write it as y. And this is 1/4, and x minus a negative 1/2 is x. I'm sorry, x minus a negative 1 is the same thing as x plus 1. All right, and again, to get it into y equals mx plus b form, really all I need to do at this point is get rid of the parentheses. So this is 1/4 x plus 1/4. Final answer. Okay, I'm going to stop the video and I will come back in the next video to talk about writing things given other information besides 2 points or a point and a slope. See you in a little bit.